Hello, welcome to this session, which is called Up Your Street, all about Weston Road in West London. Thanks to the Society of Genealogists for inviting me to take part in all about that place. And hopefully you will find this as compelling as I do. My name is Gill Thomas. I'm a professional genealogist, and I am currently the chair of the Association of Genealogists and Researchers in Archives in England and Wales. But enough about me. Let's move on with our study. One of the reasons why I think the whole discipline of creating a one place or a one street study has become so popular is partly on the back of television programs like The Secret History of Our Streets or the very compelling House Through Time with David Olusoga. And I think that's gripped the popular imagination because it introduces bits of history, sociology. There are lots of other things. So it's not just focusing about one person, but it can be focusing on an entire community. I am just going to share my screen so you can have a look at the slideshow, which I will now begin. There we are. So, where is Weston Road? Well, I live in Chiswick in London. So the area here is the city, full of skyscrapers, the stock exchange, it's the financial hub. Here we have Westminster, which is where the Houses of Parliament are. And then further upstream, probably about 7 or 9 miles away, is Chiswick, originally Cheeswick, on the River Thames, not too far from the Georgian palaces at Kew and Kew Botanic Gardens. And then we have my area here, Weston Road, which is in the north of Chiswick. But this is Weston Road. It's a very, very typical ordinary street of terraced housing. Terrace housing is actually the most frequently occurring type of housing stock in the UK at 26%. And this street could be anywhere. It could be Cardiff, it could be Manchester, it could be Southampton. The only thing it's less likely to be is in Scotland because terrace housing for some reason is less prevalent in Scotland. However, to return to Weston Road, built around about 1907. And how do we know that? Well, it doesn't appear in census records, so it's not included in the census return for 1901. And looking at newspaper reports, we can see that by 1907, it was being the subject of tenders to be made up as a highway by Acton Council. This map, and maps are an absolutely wonderful resource. I could have looked at the 1939 A to Z of London. I could have looked at Charles Booth's poverty map of London or Goad's fire insurance maps of London. But I actually found this local map in our local Ealing Studies department, and this is the map of the area. Weston Road is here, these two blue lines, and it abuts the Northern Overground Railway, so not the tube. To this area here, just on the other side of the tracks, in 1900, there are orchards, and this is the Swan Pub. This is to become the Evershed and Vignoles radar components factory, bombed during the war, House South Acton Station, and then here we have Fairlawn House. And Weston Road is built on what was the grounds of Fairlawn House. Later on, there was an infant school that was built on its site. And where I live, I think it was probably round about where the stables were. Sadly, I can't find any images of Fairlawn House yet, but I live in hope. So where to begin? Well, the good news is that you will typically start with resources that will be very familiar to you from your own family history research, your ancestral research. The the resources that I focused on I began with Census Records. I wanted to build up a picture of exactly who was living in the street, how many people were there, how dense was the population, how many people were living in a house, what kind of jobs did they do, etc., etc. And I did that by downloading the information into a series of spreadsheets, and that gave me the opportunity to analyse the average ages, the places of birth, so on and so forth. But there are other records, apart from these ones that you will use for genealogy, which are additional ones that will be very, very useful to you when you start doing your one-place study. And rate books can be found in local studies departments and libraries, and leases and deeds will be from, for example, the deed of your house. So combining the two sets of information, I was able to find out that by the 1911 census, there were about 106 households in the road living in 53 buildings. Only 3 were owner-occupiers and 103 were rented. And looking at the deeds, I could see that John James Hedge, who must have been a very early type of property developer, who was a dentist by profession, included in his deeds the prohibitions for anybody running any business associated with alcohol. There was to be no manufacturing and no brick making and no pig keeping. The other side of the railway tracks didn't have such prohibitions for the people who were the tenants of the houses there, and I think that probably contributed to the development of slums, which were ultimately all demolished in the 1960s. However, returning to the census, what else do the census tells us? Well, in both cases, in 1911 and 1921, I can tell you that the ratio of men to women was about 50-50. There were slightly more children living in the road. By children, I mean under 14. In 1911, that had dropped down to about 140 by 1921. And in 1911, less than 7% of the adult population had been born within a 5-mile radius. So that tells me that there are quite a lot of people coming into this area. It's being developed. It had been orchard land or lands of big houses. There are more and more people coming in. There are factories opening. We can see that by the kind of jobs that people do. We can see that they are also working in retail and associated trades. And surprise, surprise, not being that far from the railway, they are working on the railways as well. And things don't really change hugely. Slightly by 1921, you do get more people actually working in factories and slightly more people doing white collar, low paid clerical work. But the other area that Acton Green is known for is its laundries, and it's also known as Soapside Island. And a lot of laundries had moved out of places like Notting Hill and Kensington, so they'd moved west because of the increasing price of land and because of population increases. So they've been displaced out towards the Acton and Chiswick area, and quite a lot of the local women took piecework in, so they would take in laundry work for mending or for ironing. My initial thought about doing the one-place study was that I really wanted to look at the effect of the First World War on the local population. And I discovered that there were 106 men of conscription age living in the street, of whom 19 enlisted or were conscripted. 9 of them lost their lives, including, tragically, one young man who joined the RAF and lasted exactly 1 month before his Handley Page bomber crash landed, killing all 7 of the crew on a test flight in West Bromwich. And also, it's also quite interesting because quite a lot of the women also worked in nearby munitions factories or in aircraft factories. There was an aerodrome in Acton, and there was also the factory where they made sock with camels in Richmond, which is also accessible by that North London Overground railway line. But We can also see other things that we can also see and learn about new things to do with our study by searching for photographs. There is a London Picture Archive, or even just Googling may turn up surprising things. So we have here some images of some of the shops that I talked about. This rather grand building was actually a corner shop. I thought it was a pub for many years. Then we had the Soapsud Island stores, which only closed about 20 years ago. It's a strange triangular building. This building here is on the corner of Weston Road and a nearby street. It's unadorned with any of the plasterwork that the houses tend to be dressed up with. And you can tell by the sort of flat front appearance of it that it was originally a shop. And I was told by an ex-resident that the man who ran the shop was known because he didn't wash his hands between distributing paraffin and cutting up cheese. So the cheese all smelled of paraffin. This image here is of, it's taken during the general strike, and it's of policemen guarding the entrance to the London omnibus transport depot, which also was at the end of Weston Road. You get an idea of just how well images can add and provide some further colour. And literally, they can provide further colour if you find an image like this. Somebody has gone to the trouble of superimposing an image of a corner shop and colouring in the advertising hoardings in an area which is now actually occupied by a children's playground. I talked about the slum clearances during the 1960s. Well, this is the area that the slum clearances were taken from, and somebody has superimposed it over the top. So, but that's very unusual to find that. But if you're thinking about your study and you know that an area is going to be developed, you may want to go and do that yourself. Take a photo now, take a photo when the rebuilding has been done. Bonus information. Well, I have quite a lot of extra information provided by a woman who was born in the house next door to the one I live in now. And she was able to tell me all about the sort of arrangements, how the upstairs household would traipse through the scullery of the downstairs household to get into the garden. I can't begin to imagine the rows there must have been. I'll just wash that floor. Did the houses have bathrooms? No, they didn't. They did have running water and they did have indoor toilets. And also just to provide a little bit of colour, on Sunday mornings, Nora told me that that the men used to go down to the railway tavern, and they would drink there until they returned home for their traditional Sunday lunch. It was not a place for children or for socialising, she said. It's now a rather fancy gastropub. So you can see how things change. And actually, understanding how things change can in itself inform your study. Talking to her, she was able to explain how the focus of the street was all on Acton. Everybody went to work in Acton if they went in a factory. Everybody went to Acton to do their shopping. Everybody went to Acton to go to the cinema or to have fish and chips or to work. Now, everything has switched 180 degrees because where we live is on the border of Chiswick and Acton. Everybody, because Chiswick is considered to be more upmarket, everybody's focus is on Chiswick. And that's where they go to their Waitrose, and that's where they go to the cinema, and that's where they go to have a night out. So it's interesting how these things do completely change. And I think really I've probably come to the end. To paraphrase Mark Twain, I'm really sorry for such a long lecture, but I didn't have time to write a short one. Thank you for listening to this 10-minute session. I hope it's inspired you to cast the net wider than the usual roundup of genealogical resources because of the ability to draw in history, sociology, but also there's another factor here. It provides an opportunity to reach out to neighbours and older residents who can really help to bring life to the street to produce something far more interesting and thought-provoking. So I wish you good luck with your project, and I hope that you have much success. As I say, my name is Gill Thomas, and thank you very much for joining me. do note my email if you have any questions, or you'd like to ask me any further questions about Weston Road, then do get in touch. Thank you.